There we go. Okay, did everybody see the main slide? Okay, cool. Aaron, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, so welcome to our monthly musings. This time we're talking about best practices for nonprofits that Micah is going to present. As a reminder, we are recording this and this will be up on the website. I'm not entirely sure how long it takes Karen to get it up, maybe a week or two. So if you miss anything or if you want to share it with someone, it will be available on our website. And that's all from me. So I will turn it over to Micah.
Thank you. My name is Micah Huyser. I am the executive director at the Nebraska Prairie Museum. I am also I'm on the board for NMA and Mountain Plains Museum Association and our local chamber. And anyhow, a lot of hats to the side. I kind of originally I had planned on a group in Lincoln presenting today. But they had a scheduling conflict with another client of theirs. So I'm going to try and pick up a lot of the information that they've shared with me, but also I'm happy to disclose that like many things, in the museum world, we like to steal ideas and make it your own. And so I'm happy to present that part. So when I'm saying best practice for nonprofits, this is coming from a little bit of the survey that we just conducted, some of the background that I observed with that, but also just some main observations and things like that I've made with my own organization, with other organizations. Right now, I'm taking a class for nonprofit management at the University of Oklahoma. And so a couple of things in the background of this, and I'm going to keep it very general. Please write down any like notes or anything like that. If there's anything that your specific nonprofit does that is maybe not listed, but you think is a great idea, let me know at the end. I'd be happy to share. So we'll get started. First off, any nonprofit can't exist without, members, organizers, people that are making it happen. There's a list of a whole bunch of different nonprofits, but they all have one thing in common. They all need a board or a way that they can democratize their leadership structure. And so the first off is, is that you need to start with what are the different roles? How many board members do you have to start? Is 20, 13, 15? What is that kind of minimum or maximum that is set? And that should be kind of your founders of it. If you're looking back on your own current board and they have a bunch of vacancies, well, maybe you need to revisit and looking at like your bylaws, say, okay, do we need 30 people on a board, which I really hope not. Do we only need 8? Is 6 getting too few? Those are some of the questions that you need to start asking. But then more importantly, you need to define these roles. And these roles are kind of ubiquitous with every nonprofit. You need a president. And in case that president is absent, you need a vice president. Sometimes it's a vice president is a president-elect. The language in both of those are pretty similar. A treasurer and a secretary for the minutes. Specifically, the treasurer, the secretary and treasurer might have unique roles depending on the type of nonprofit. So for example, here at the Nebraska Prairie Museum, we get a portion of the county levy. And since that's a tax that we get in from the county, we have to disclose a lot more financial scrutiny as well as publishing our minutes. And so the treasurer and secretary roles you want to make sure is defined clearly on what is required for your nonprofit. Committee chairs, is listing out what is a committee, what does a committee do, what does a chair do, and then a board member, what does a general board member do? And I'll get a little bit more into that when we talk about the bylaws. But first off, though, a good nonprofit has educated board members. And that's not meaning that they have a master's or PhD or whatever. That means that they understand what the organization is and they understand their role in it. And that's why I really want to just preach out there is board member orientation. And this applies to not only a board member that has board member that's been on there for 20 years. Sometimes it's nice to go back through with everything and go through that. And board assessment, this is another part that's kind of tricky because we never want to, it's not really like a job description, but it also kind of is like a job description. You want to make sure that the board is in the best interest of the organization and that they're going to see it succeed all the way through. And so having some sort of an annual self-evaluation is saying, okay, how are we doing? Are we voting on things? Are we staying on mission? It doesn't necessarily have to be the individual board members themselves. It could be the board recognizing how their, leadership is overall. Are we getting things done? What is our roadblocks? And evaluating what we need to accomplish the mission or accomplish those goals. And then last one we'll get into a bit more is bylaws and policies. And then my last statement there at the end is another one I really like to preach is never assume that your common sense is everybody's common sense. So that's one thing that a lot of these smaller organizations that I've been a part of, they're like, oh, well, that's just well known. Everybody should do it that way. And it's like, no, get it in writing. Then you make sure everybody is on that same page. Because if you assume that everybody has the same common sense and then something bad happens, well, I just did what I thought we needed to do. Well, no, and so never assume that everybody is kind of on that same page. Make sure that you are on that same page. And that gets me into our bylaws. Probably. There we go. So bylaws versus policies. That's always a very interesting one that we've redone our policies here at the Nebraska Prairie Museum. We'll be hopefully ratifying them next week. But it's about 36 pages of policies that we're redoing. And the reason why is because a lot of these just really haven't been visited in a long time. And we finally had the time, and this is why I kind of got, that's where the spark of this topic came from, was looking at what, I've been working on and researching. So bylaws should be the backbone. These should be the most difficult things to change in the organization, but that also means, like the statement at the bottom there, is you kind of want to keep them very rigid, but also you don't want to get to the point where you can't make any decisions and you can't make things happen. So you want to make sure that your bylaws are very strict as far as what it defines, but also it doesn't pigeonhole you into, oh, well, we need exactly this, and then we can't do anything, and so that's where I say you have a place for bylaws and you have a place for policies. And so the first one, what the bylaws should do is your governance, is what I said before, what is defining what the leadership is, defining what the treasurer, the secretary, the vice president, define what those are and who they are. How are they elected? How are they put into terms? Is the president an annual term? Is it biannual? And then how do you vote, like on general things for the board meeting? Typically they do Robert Rules of Order, standard practice for it here in America. But that doesn't necessarily fit every nonprofit. That's just the most common one that everybody kind of understands. And so, but regardless, your bylaws should illustrate how the board can make those decisions. And so how do they vote? How many board members are quorum? That kind of goes back to that initial question of how many board members does your organization have? Conflict of interest has been interesting because I've seen it both as a policy, but I've also seen it more common, especially today, as a bylaw. And this also is important because if it's part of a bylaw, this also goes into some of the tax requirements. So if your organization gets a form of taxes, they also require disclosure of conflict of interest with new board members. Stupid gnats. Oh my goodness. Anybody else struggling with gnats? Ugh, terrible. Okay, and then the last one is, how do you amend your bylaws and how do you amend your policies? So for example, the chamber that I'm on, for our policies, we have it written that they take a majority vote by all board members present 3 board meetings in a row in order to change the language of a policy. And so that one I feel like is I like it. It kind of keeps everybody honest, and and again, policies should be pretty rigid. They shouldn't be easily just to be like, oh, tomorrow let's change this one. It should be a very conscious effort to do. And the bylaws, Nebraska doesn't require nonprofits to disclose their bylaws and have them recorded, to my knowledge. Some states do require that the bylaws be published not published, but like sent into the state, something. Anyway, Nebraska doesn't require it, to my knowledge. And so I really don't I'm still looking into what really how you can keep your bylaws more permanent. I'm still looking into that one, but I just know that my board, we've been trying to revision our bylaws for 3 years now. And so we started with policies because that was easier. And at the bottom is, yeah, keep your bylaws direct. Don't make them so black and white that you can't do anything. Leave the detail for the policies. And into policies. So the policies should go into more detail, but leave little questioning. So where your bylaws should be a little bit more on the, they should be direct on what they're trying to say, but you don't make them so black and white you can't do anything. Policies are where your black and white is. Policies should really, lay out exactly what this role does. It should go into a lot more detail onto, like, up here we put, bylaws, governance. Governance is an important thing for the bylaws. We also have governance as a policy because, again, your governance policy goes into a lot more detail than your bylaws do because you're going to lay out, and it should be somewhat redundant. They should be, they should be speaking the same language, but they also should be a lot more detailed as far as who does what, when, and then that kind of stuff. Same thing, I put code of ethics on here. So that's another one that's been creeping up more recently. And I do find that a lot of these different policies have a lot of overlap between them and your bylaws. But like I said, your policy should be a lot clearer. And then specifically for museums, libraries, different places like that is collections. That's a unique one for the museums. And my other idea too is with policies is make it your own, make it fit your organization with policies. And what I mean by that is what works for one nonprofit doesn't work for everyone. And if your organization runs into an issue, you need to make sure that after that issue is resolved, that it doesn't happen again. And that's a good place for policies. And that's one that, disaster and emergency, you want to make sure you have that put into place a little bit. So that you're not having to butt up against some of the other ones that you have put in together. These are just a taste of ones. Like I said, I can go into a lot more detail, but we'll probably be talking about this until 3-4 o'clock in the evening if I went into super detail. After today's program, if anybody is interested, I will give Aaron a copy of our current bylaws as they've been revisioned so that you guys can all steal some ideas from. If you'd like to, of all of our policies that we've been working on here at the Prairie Museum. And then this one I'm making into a separate one. So you have the way that your organization runs, you have a lot of your policies and how the organization is operating. Now you need to go into probably the most important part of any nonprofit is the finances. And this is because every nonprofit that's ever had a scandal always has something to do with a dollar. And that is the number one way that you can ruin public trust is if you have a financial scandal. This can ruin a lot of nonprofits. And so that's why I always tend to lean on the proactive side. And so that means that every dollar spent needs to have a purpose to it. It needs to advance the mission. It can't just be for oh, I really like, this. It should never be for a person. It should always be advancing the mission. And so that means that when you're spending things or you're telling your board and you're writing off on these expenditures, you need to be asking yourself, is every expenditure line item, is that advancing the mission? And so that's the first one. Second one is an annual audit. Here at the Nebraska Prairie Museum, we actually have it in our bylaws that we have an annual audit regardless of requirements. To my understanding, again, I'm not a tax expert, but nonprofits are required in the state of Nebraska to have a outside financial audit done if they have expenditures going over 250,000. Big asterisks on that one. I don't know if they changed it. I don't know. I haven't. That's just from what I've been told. So if your organization spends more than that, you probably should be looking at an audit. And also, and this is something that I brought up. So like our chamber here that I work, that I on the board for, again, they don't have an annual audit. They don't pay for an outside audit. But I love doing internal audits. An internal audit, is one that you don't have to file. But it's also one that it shows that you're proactively making sure that every year you're probing the financial records. looking for those issues. And so, typically boards will sign off on finances once a month. This is a way that you can look at, okay, over the course of the year, where did every dollar go? And that takes a lot of time and effort, but I do think it is important, especially because you can tell your donors, no, we look through it, we have a lot of set. And my last one too is many eyes prevent sticky fingers. And that's a good one too. And that's going back to my first slide talking about describing what the roles do. A board member should be a financial auditor of the organization. That means that every single board member has to be signing off on the financial transactions. And that means that let's say you have 12 board members, that's 12 eyes looking at all of the receipts. Should be in a perfect world. But that also means that you need to educate and incentivize your board members to pay close attention to the finances because it is incredibly important. And that's also goes into as signatories. So here at my museum, we have 4 board members plus me as a director as signatories for checks. But that also extends to our credit and debit card systems, automatic payments, and all of that. And that means that those 4 people are liable for transactions of the organization. So if we sign a check and that goes to somebody, well, the 2 people that signed it are responsible for reporting of where that dollar went to. And that's also a way that you can prevent, again, we've seen a lot, and this is where my organization in our last audit that we had, they made sure that every receipt from a online transaction, especially, but also even just regular debit or credit transactions are signed off by 2 people, just like they would with checks. And the reason why is just like we've seen, even in our own county at our nursing home, one of the staff were making personal purchases on Amazon from the company account. And it was like $23,000 worth of personal transactions. And again, and that's where I think online literacy of board members is also something you might want to look into, is making sure they understand, that what an Amazon is. But again, I don't understand how you can have $23,000 missing without having that careful scrutiny of the bills and the receipts. So that one is one that I think is really important just as much as leadership. And then lastly, I think I'm doing good on time, is publish your bylaws and your policies. If you have a website, that's awesome. If you have a way that you can publish it in your own organization. But I also say, be proud of it, be upfront with it, because that increases public trust. Your bylaws and your policies should be something that you are proud of as an organization. They are ones that and this is also in the same way, our collections policies we ratified in September of last year, and I pull on it almost daily. It's because we'll get somebody that comes in from outside and they want to donate another pump organ. Anybody else out there have 20-something pump organs in your museum? And it's very, very nice that I can tell that donor saying, thank you so much for thinking of us. But due to our, we're a mission-driven, curatorial policy, we do not have the resources to adequately take care of it. If you would have any issues with this, please take it up with our curatorial committee, and then they can review that policy. If you can pull back to the policies, that also is a good way you can politely tell people no, in that kind of a sense. So it rely on your policies just as much as you're proud of getting them out there. And that goes back to my policies things. You have to follow them. If they're public and somebody really wants to make a stink of it, they will say, oh, so-and-so the president has been violating their policies that they have on. So that also keeps you accountable. So it's a double-edged sword on that one. And then my second one is put together a 1 to 5 year plan, and then make sure it's a checklist. Something like I ran into when I first came out here to the Prairie Museum is they had things that should have been done by staff within a couple of days. Hey, we really should paint this bathroom. That's not a strategic goal. That's not a long-term year plan. That's just a maintenance thing. And so you can make things too short, but also making sure that we want to add a $30 million, expansion. That's okay. How are you actually going to get that done? So make sure that your 1 year plan is concise and can get done in that year. And if it doesn't, you got to find out an excuse. Why didn't this happen? How did this happen? What do we need to do? And I find that the best way to do that is make a checklist. So let's say we need we need to replace a toilet, or we need to remodel a bathroom. Let's put that. So then you need to put down on your checklist, how do you get your funding? When are the grants due? When you need to get your donors involved? Your next check should be, okay, we need to have contractors by this date and this date. So how many bids do you want to get in for this bathroom remodel? So you want to lay those out, and so that they can be executed. They can get checked off of the list. That's just my personal way, how I like to do it. And then create a plan that works again. This is for your organization, the organization that you represent. This is supposed to be one that works for you to make sure that your board can make the best decisions possible and to advance the mission. Because at the end of the day, what is your nonprofit even for if it's not to advance that mission? And then last thing I put in there is the Nebraska Guidelines and Principles. This is from the Nebraska Nonprofit Advocacy Alliance, something like that. I stole a lot of ideas from them too. That they have a lot of really good videos, especially if you're wanting to just one of the specific things I've talked about today. They've got really nice videos and stuff like that you can share with board members. And so that's all I have for the program for today. I think it leaves me a good 10, 15 minutes for questions. Did anybody have any points or anything like that you saw that your organization does that you would like to share, and maybe see if that's a good idea? Or did anybody have any questions?
We go about getting a copy of your said bylaws and policies?
Yeah, yep. I'll email Aaron that, and then Aaron, is that like on our website afterwards? I think Karen mentioned that.
Yeah, Karen usually will post it. I will just be the go-between because I have no idea how to do that.
So it should be on our website where you find the recording of this, I believe, on the
and
Nebraska Association conference, yeah.
And there are examples of other organizations, bylaws, policies, and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure what's all on there. I have for ours, this is just an example of what we do with some of this, regarding our policies. We always put at the bottom when it was established and then when we review them. So we have a 3 to 5 year review thing. So that might be something just to keep track of, help you keep track of. Because I mean, in some cases you do your policy and then you kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
that you forget you need to look through it, or at least evaluate it. And you might say, oh yeah, we're doing just fine. And other times you might, oh, you know what, we need to change this. So I always have it on the bottom of our policy that, okay, we reviewed it last year, so we're good for a couple more years.
Yeah, and that's what we've done too, is we've made it a living document. It means that it's like all of our policies are on one big docket, kind of, where it's listed, numbers, letters. And then under each of the individual policies, it'll have written in when they were enacted. And just like you're saying, it's good to review them. We haven't set here yet of what our review policy, but I think 3 years is plenty. I think that's a good mark to review them. Another thing that we're implementing after these are enacted too is giving a paper copy or a digital copy for new board members as we bring on those new board members. And we are requiring that they sign at the bottom after all of the policy pages that they have read and reviewed them. Every board member should know, of course, you're not going to memorize every single policy, but you need to have your board members at least acknowledge that they've read them. Especially because they're making decisions based, with the best interest of the organization. And that means they should know the policies. But yeah, any other questions, or does anybody have another ideas or anything? Okay. Well, yeah.
I have a question related to under finances.
Yeah.
So it's kind of off the subject for what you've done, but we are going to be having like a tea coming up this summer. And it costs a lot to put on a tea because you have scones and expensive things. How do museums, do they charge for that? Because obviously we don't have the funds to just give food to everybody who comes. What suggestions do you have?
I would first make a budget. This one thing I didn't mention in my financial part, but if you put together a budget, that also is a really good way that you can red flag if somebody is, stealing, is because if it's really over budget in this thing, or if it's really under budget on your income, then you'll kind of know that. But it's also good just for decision making. But I would start off with just in a simple Excel sheet, name how much is it going to cost? Name how much is it going to cost. That way you can put it all together. And then you can have on the same lines as your income. How much are you anticipating? And if you did ticket sales and different things like that, we've done in the past, we do like a church system where you basically have two people present that count the money right out in a slip of paper on how much, is in that deposit. Then you have both of those people sign off that they both agree that that's the amount. And then you can take that to the bank. That's another way, multiple eyes deal. Is that kind of answering your question?
We do the budget, we do the money on that. The problem is what do we charge the people to come in to cover the cost of our food? And if some people say, well, you're a nonprofit, you should just go suggest a donation. Other people said, if you charge something, you're going to have to start doing sales tax. And what is the easiest way so that your costs are all covered for an event
Is this
from the
event,
people that come?
okay, so is this a fundraiser or is this just an event?
Probably just an event, and if there's any money, it'll just go in the treasury.
Okay, because there's different. We could do a whole monthly musings on this type of thing, I think. I guess my suggestion, so if it is a fundraiser, if you turn it, then you can have a set price. You can say, hey, we're having this tea and it's going to cost you $5, or pick a price. You as a nonprofit, you can charge a cost. If you want to, in some cases, if you put a free will donation, you might get more money than if you do charge something. It's
No,
really
we don't.
Yeah. Well, it's in some places I've been told that.
Yeah.
Okay,
It
yeah,
depends
some
on
do,
what
yeah,
it
but yeah.
So
In our
It's-
case, all of our events, we'll have, coffee and that with our programming, or even like our bigger events like Swedish Days and Veterans Breakfast that we put on. We actually make more than we put into it just by having a free will basket right in front of people when they go through the line. That's just with us. Even with like entry into the museum, we just have as a free will donation. And again, switching to that model, we found, you have the goodwill side of it where people, don't want to pay 15, 20 bucks to go through a museum when they've got 6 kids. But then at that other side is that, we found we actually probably get more money at the end of the day. But again, that's different to each organization. If you were, this is, I guess, the simplest way that you would do it is you just do a cost benefit. So if you are expecting 50 people, you take the expenses that you have into it, divide it by 50, and then that's what you would ask at the door with an extra couple bucks added on. So if you're expecting, $5 per deal, you charge 6 or 7. But that's, I think, the simplest way if that's what you're looking to do. It just depends if how many people you're anticipating, what are the costs of your supplies going into it. We do that cost benefit for like our gift shop, same thing, our t-shirts cost X, we have to make a little bit of a markup on it, so we have to charge Y.
Do you collect sales tax on that?
On
In
our
the
gift
gift
shop,
shop?
yes.
Okay. But for like our tea, we don't have to collect sales tax on it. Like it will cost to $8 for food and expenses, because we know what our cost is. Add $2
No.
to it. We need $10.
There's yeah, because like farmers markets and stuff like that, they don't have to charge sales tax. Depends on the scope and the number of items sold or something like that. But yeah, there's a tax thing with it. I'm not an expert in that at all. So I couldn't really definitively tell you, yes, this can, or yeah, won't, or this can't. I don't I just know like we've done events kind of similar and we've not had to charge sales tax with it. We've not had to report sales tax with it. Our CPA said that it was fine. If, for example, like if we were to have like a refrigerator and resold like soda or something like that, that would have to have sales tax on it. But if it's at like, I mean, you can also get into the whole issue of like, oh, whether was the coffee and everything made into a certified approved kitchen. You can get very, into the weeds of following the rule, and the law to a T, and it just ends up shutting down the event. So I would say just start simple, and go from there. But like I said, liabilities wise, I know nothing about taxes, and I am not giving any tax advice to anybody.
Okay. That's what I had. Thank you.
I just looked up the phone number for the Department of Revenue regarding sales and use tax. And I don't know if this is just for the Department of Revenue, like in general, or for their sales and use tax division. But you can call 402-471-5729.
Connectivity problem.
Thank you, Kelly. I should have just done
Yes.
that.
Yep. I bet I can look this number up.
Okay, another fun deal that we did and I didn't really talk about, but again, goes into the ideas of your, we didn't have it as a policy. It's actually a separate living document, but it lists out like the mission statement for each of the different committees that we have here at the museum. So it's a mission statement and then it lists who's on there. And then very simple bullet points of this is what this committee does, this is what the committee does, this is what it does. And that way people on that committee can stay on task, because sometimes when they're on different committees, the meetings can lose a little bit of a structure. And so it also helps with new board members when you bring them on, because you can give them a list of each of the mission statements for the different committees, and then they can decide which committee they want to volunteer for. So that's another one I forgot to mention in my presentation, but has been successful for my board and leadership. So other than that, thank you very much. Like I said, I'll hopefully you should be getting those documents here soon on the Nebraska Museum Association website. And thank you again for coming and attending this month's monthly musings. I appreciate your time. Hopefully everybody got a little bit of something they can share with the rest of their organization.
So a couple of things before we close. Our next one is March 22nd, and it's a conference preview. So our conference is in Grand Island at the Storer Museum this year, April 8th and 9th. You should have gotten a postcard by now. If not, let us know and we'll get you a postcard. You can go on to our website and register for the conference. But the next one of these will be sort of a preview of what's going to be happening for that. They've changed it up this year. And so there's going to be some new things. I think there's going to be a couple more workshops. I don't know if Micah, you were on that committee or not. I was not on the committee. So, but I know they've got at least some more exciting workshops going on, a couple of really good speakers.
Yeah, this year's conference is worth coming to. We've got a lot of really cool programs and everything like that we put together. So we'll be previewing that all at the next monthly musing. So great opportunity to see, and we'd love to see everybody there at this year's conference. It's centrally located, so people east, west, north, and south, you don't have an excuse this year. So
So yeah, and I think the conference hotel, I'd have to go back and double check on the website. I think if you want to get the room rate or the block rate, I think you have to get it by March 7th. So if you're coming from a ways and you're going to be staying overnight, you need to get your hotel reservations in by March 7th. So, but you can go on the website, nebraskamuseums.org, and find that information. So if there's nothing else, any more questions? Thank you, Micah, for your presentation.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Well, if not, everybody enjoy the rest of your day. It looks, at least here, looks like it's going to be a nice day. So hope everybody has a good day and a good weekend, and we'll see you next month.